It's 11:47 p.m. The conversation ended at 4 in the afternoon. But right now, in the dark, you're having it again. Word for word. Why did I say that? You flip the pillow over. They probably think I'm ridiculous. You close your eyes harder, as if that would help. I should have said something else. Almost 8 hours have passed. The other person has probably eaten dinner, watched a show, fallen asleep by now. You're still there, in that chair, in that exact moment, rebuilding a scene that no longer exists anywhere except in your head. You change your responses, you change your tone, you rehearse what you'd say if you could go back. And for a few seconds, it feels like you're solving something. But 20 minutes pass, then 40, and you're in exactly the same place. Why does your mind keep trying to solve something that's already over? Why does the perfect response always arrive 3 hours late? This has a name: rumination. And there's a huge difference between reflecting on something and getting trapped inside it. Because thinking can help you solve a problem. But thinking more doesn't always mean solving more. Sometimes it just means taking another lap, and another, around a door that's already closed. Imagine you talked to someone who matters to you yesterday. The conversation didn't end badly, but it didn't end exactly well either. There was an odd pause, an expression you couldn't read. The other person said, "It's fine," and went on with their day. But you didn't. On the way home, at first you think, that was a little awkward, perfectly normal. Then, did they think I was upset? Then, maybe I sounded arrogant. And finally, with no new information at all, your mind has already built an entire story. Here's what matters. Through all of that, you didn't get a call. No new message arrived. Reality stayed exactly the same. The only thing that changed was how much time you spent thinking about it. Rumination feels useful because it looks like an investigation. Your mind asks questions, searches for details, compares versions, and that creates a very convincing feeling. If I just keep thinking a little longer, I'll finally understand. But often that answer never comes, because some situations contain information you simply don't have. You don't know what the other person was thinking. You don't know if they were tired, worried, distracted, thinking about something else entirely. And the mind doesn't like leaving blank spaces, so it tries to fill them. Not necessarily with facts, with possibilities. And when you're anxious, the negative possibilities start feeling far more important than the rest. That's how you end up treating a hypothesis like a conclusion. They haven't replied yet becomes, they're upset. Then, I did something wrong. And finally, I always ruin these things. Look at what just happened. We started with a message that hasn't arrived, and ended with a statement about who you are, all without a single new piece of evidence. Here's one of the hardest traps to spot. Rumination promises control, because the past has something frustrating about it. It already happened. You can't go back to that meeting. You can't erase that sentence. But your mind can simulate it. If I had said this instead, if I had waited 5 seconds, it's like replaying the same recording, searching for a different ending, even though the ending was already recorded hours ago. And for a moment, that simulation gives you the feeling that you're still doing something, even though you're actually trying to control an event that's already over. That's why some conversations come back so strongly, right when everything else goes quiet. During the day you have tasks, people, screens, noise. But night comes, the distractions fade, and there it was, the unfinished business, waiting for you. Not necessarily because it's the most important event of your life, but because your mind still doesn't know where to file it. It doesn't know if it was dangerous. It doesn't know if you need to fix something, so it brings it back up, once and again. Like a notification no one has marked as read. Now, this doesn't mean thinking about a conversation is bad. Reflection is necessary. You can realize you were unfair, recognize a mistake, learn to communicate better. The difference is in what happens next. Reflection tends to produce something, a conclusion, a decision, an action. Rumination tends to produce more rumination. For example, I think I interrupted too much in that meeting. That can turn into reflection. Next time, I'll wait a few seconds before responding. There's an observation, there's an action, and the process can end. But it can also turn into, why do I always do that? Everyone probably noticed. Why can't I just act normal? And 2 hours later, you don't have a better plan. You just feel worse. One very useful question is this thought producing new information or just repeating the same accusation? Because you can change the words without actually changing the thought. Why did I do that? What's wrong with me? How could I be so stupid? They sound like different questions, but they might be the same lap around the same circle. And there's something else. Once you start ruminating, it's easy to believe you need to find complete certainty before you can rest. You need to know they're not upset, that they didn't judge you, that everything's fine. But in many relationships and human situations, that absolute certainty simply doesn't exist. You can't access another person's mind directly. So if your peace of mind depends on absolute certainty, your mind will always be able to find one more question. So, how do you get out of the loop? Not by winning an argument against every thought, because if you respond to every doubt with another hour of analysis, you're teaching your mind that every doubt deserves an investigation. The first step can be much simpler. Name what's happening. Not, I need to solve this, but I'm going over this again. There's a difference. The first sentence puts you inside the problem. The second lets you observe the process. Then you can ask yourself another question. Is there something concrete I can actually do? If you said something hurtful, maybe you can apologize. If there was a misunderstanding, maybe you can clear it up. But if there's no concrete action available, thinking for another 3 hours probably won't magically produce the missing information. Sometimes what you need isn't another answer. It's tolerating that you don't have one yet. It also helps to separate two mental columns, what I know and what I'm assuming. I know they took a while to reply. That's information. I know they're mad at me. Maybe not. I know my boss paused after my presentation. Information. I know they think I'm incompetent. That might be interpretation. It seems like a small difference, but it can stop a possibility from turning into a verdict. Another tool is changing the question. Rumination tends to ask, why did this happen? Over and over. Sometimes a more concrete question helps more. What do I need to do right now? Not tomorrow, not 5 years from now. Now. Maybe the answer is sending a message, maybe waiting, maybe apologizing, maybe absolutely nothing. And that last option counts too, because not every awkward moment needs repairing. You can have a strange conversation and still be someone people care about. You can say something clumsy and not destroy a relationship. You cannot know exactly what someone thinks of you and still keep living your life. Your existence doesn't need to be perfectly explained after every interaction. And when the thought comes back, because it probably will, the goal doesn't have to be pushing it away. You can acknowledge it. Yeah, we've been here before. And then deliberately return to something present. Your breathing, the water in the shower, the conversation you're actually having right now. Not because you're running from the thought, but because you've already decided you don't need to solve it again. This is a bit like letting a call go unanswered when you know you have nothing new to say. Your mind calls back. Are you sure you don't want to go over that conversation again? I already went over it. 5 minutes later. But do you remember how they looked at you? Yes. What if it meant something else? Maybe. That last part is hard. Maybe. Not definitely nothing happened. Not everything will be fine. Just maybe. Because getting out of rumination means learning you don't need to eliminate every bit of uncertainty in order to move forward. And that doesn't mean becoming indifferent either. It doesn't mean you stop examining your mistakes. It means not confusing self-punishment with self-awareness. You can learn from something without interrogating yourself for hours. Some people spend years replaying conversations everyone else probably forgot within minutes. A line from a past relationship, an answer in a job interview, an awkward moment from school. And with every replay, the question seems to remain. What would my life look like if I'd done something differently? Maybe you'll never be able to answer that, because you only lived one version, the one that happened. And at some point, the work stops being about perfectly reconstructing the past. It becomes about deciding how much of the present you're still going to hand over to it. Because a 5-minute conversation can go on occupying years, if every time it resurfaces, you give it your full attention all over again. If you notice these loops taking up many hours, interfering with your sleep, your work, or your relationships, seeking professional support can also be a reasonable option. Not because overthinking is a character flaw, but because repetitive thought patterns can be worked on. Psychological approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness-based interventions have shown usefulness in reducing this kind of repetitive thinking. But even before that, there's one idea you can start remembering today. Thinking about something doesn't mean you still have to solve it. Feeling uncertain doesn't mean there's an emergency, and remembering a conversation doesn't mean you have to live it again. The next time your mind goes back to that moment, before starting another investigation, ask yourself, is there anything new here? Is there a concrete action? Am I trying to understand, or am I just taking another lap? And if there's nothing new, maybe you can let the conversation end. This time, inside you too. It's 11:47 p.m. And for the first time in weeks, you decide not to take that call. Because some conversations last 5 minutes. What turns them into hours isn't always what happened. Sometimes it's our difficulty accepting that it's already over. Learning to let go doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer asking the past for an answer that only the present can give you.